Okay, shall we continue? All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, students. Welcome back to our lecture number 1, session on foreign policy in Papua New Guinea. As you can see, we have a couple of slides which we will go through our first lesson today. Lesson number 1 today is based on foreign policy in PNG, defining the concept. Okay, all the lessons will be taken on from this book, which I have the privilege of authoring towards a PNG Foreign Policy white paper, a strategic and project management approach. Okay. So you can see former Foreign Secretary Deem and Ted Wolfers in 1989 mentioned about foreign policy making, and they have mentioned that these are very experienced people, mind you, Mr. Deem and Mr. Wolfers. Foreign policy is notoriously an elusive concept because there are a number of factors that combine to blur the distinction between foreign and domestic policy. This includes the domestic requirements and effects of globalization, or in our today's example, we can say geopolitics, the growing spread of international cooperation, and the increase in domestic acceptance and application of international law, which again affects all areas of public policy and the implementation in PNG. So what's in a name? When we're talking about foreign policy, what is it? Well, the government's general, a clear definition of it would be it's the government's general objectives to effectively manage its bilateral and multilateral relations internationally through diplomatic means. That means talking, meeting, negotiating, agreeing to disagree. And when all these fail, governments resort to military settlements. But simply, I myself have seen continue to have the definition of the foreign policy as a game plan on how a country has to play internationally. And the white paper confirms that we do have a game plan to play bilaterally and multilaterally because it shows it on paper, our intent. Without a white paper, it's just talk. So where to play and how to win. So a lot of questions can come up on what is a foreign policy, and then after you come up with the definition of a foreign policy, you start asking yourself where to play and how to win. So we look at how to manage development cooperation, either multilaterally and or bilaterally. How do we match the where and the how? How do we translate this to add value to our domestic policies? How do we then further translate this in our bilateral cooperation with other developing and or less developing economies? Excuse me. Are we adequately trained to play in these competitions? If so, what competitions can we play in, and what should we not play in? The next question: what level of competition can we play? And for those who can't, which bilateral partners should we ask to play on our behalf, so we can continue adding value to our domestic economic development agenda? Or what multilateral organizations should we join to drive this national interest? See, these are all the questions that come into play when you're trying to develop a foreign policy. And the next biggest question is the passion. How badly do you want to win? Have you invested adequately to effect the preferred result? I mean, geopolitics is not a game for the faint-hearted. And by investing women, acquiring the required human resources, training them adequately, improving the infrastructure and other required capabilities that can give you the advantage to win. The game plan, in this case, the foreign policy white paper, is it structured accordingly to enable one to get from the current or present state to the future state? See, those are the questions we have to ask when we're dealing with foreign policy formulation. The main game. So you start with the winning aspiration. What are you aspiring to do? Where to play? Where do you intend to play? Do you intend to play in the Pacific, or do you intend to play in Asia? Or do you intend to play half? It's halfway, yeah? Or do you intend not to play at all in Asia, but play around in the Pacific where you are a big fish? Because when you play in Asia, you become a small fish. And then the next biggest thing you need to ask yourself is how to win. Do we have the capabilities to win? How do you want us to win? Do we win by increasing the capabilities in Asia while we're playing in Pacific? Or do we win by having all our Chinese Mandarin speakers being posted to the Pacific when they're supposed to be posted in Asia? Those are the type of how to win questions one needs to ask. And the capabilities of your department. Do you have an aging population? Or do you have a gap in between the senior management? Or do you have a middle management that is heavy and there is less those ones down at the bottom, the staffing, and there's less management at the top? Those are the questions. And then you need to look at the enabling management environment, which I've just talked about. How do you manage it? If the game plan means putting more resources to ensure that we get access markets for our products in Asia, why are we beefing up the Americas? No, those are the type of questions we all need to ask if we have to look at the main game and win it. So what is PNG's foreign policy white paper? PNG's foreign policy in 1975 was friends to all, enemies to none. There was no white paper. The only white paper that came up was by the new government in 1982, 1981 after the Waterloo Conference, which we will talk about later on in the lectures. And in 1982, you had a white paper on active and selective engagement. The PNG Foreign Policy on APEC and its white paper called the Roadmap to Domesticate the Outcomes to the APEC 2018 Leaders Chair's Error Corner Statement was the other foreign policy white paper which the government put up after the hosting of APEC in 2018. It was endorsed by Cabinet in 2020 under Cabinet Decision number 36/2020. So between 1982 and 2024, the foreign policy statements were only presented in Parliament, but there were no white papers apart from these two. Until very, very recently, maybe earlier this month, the Eminent Peasants Group presented the draft foreign policy white paper to Foreign Minister Chachenko. So that will go through the vetting process, and hopefully it will be fast and it will get endorsed, so that then we can have a game plan to play with internationally. So next steps. I guess the next steps we'll look at how to implement the white paper initiatives or the activities. There's a lot of next steps. Now you have a game plan. So what are you going to do with the players now? We look at how we can guess at how the Red Cliff Dolphins were formed a couple of years ago. The build-up started maybe 2-3 years before the players actually ran out in their reds and whites. So what was the next steps? They brought in the coach, super coach. They brought in the players, and the next step was charting out. The next steps was this: how to play, where to play, how to win, the capabilities, and the enabling management environment. That is what has made them in the second year to be sitting on the top 4. So when you said we start using an NRL or rugby league example to liken this, it opens up our mind to how a nation should play abroad. At this point in time, we have geopolitics. It's becoming a telling factor in how PNG moves its international relations endeavor across. Find there are sectors of the community that says, well, if the one side doesn't give us what we want, we will go with the other side. But the risk of that, when you watch a lot of narco movies on Netflix, you will realize that the person with nothing cannot bargain. Because you will be found floating in one of the isolated rivers down the road or in one of the drains. So again, it begs us the question of do we have the capability of aligning accordingly or balancing our resources to ensure that we have an enabling management environment to manage the environment properly in our favor. So that's the, Mr. Aguirre, that's the end of our first lesson. I think I came up with a lot of questions that will set the platform for us going forward in the next 9, 10, 11 weeks. And also with the additional hours we're putting in for the Q&As. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ako. So that brings us to the end of our first online lecture for this week. And we will continue on Friday. So if you have any questions for those of you students attending via Zoom or via Facebook, if you have any questions or comments, we'll meet on Friday and then we'll go through the questions and the comments. So you can share on Moodle for the students, and for those viewing via Facebook, you can share in the live stream thread. So I'll take note of the questions and comments and then bring it up for discussion when we meet on Friday from 1:30 to 2:30 this Friday. So thank you, Mr. Ako, for your time and for the students for your attendance as well.
Thank you, Mr. Aguirre, and thank you everyone for your time. Have a good afternoon.
Also, we thank all our viewers on YouTube as well. If you'll be watching via YouTube, thank you for viewing this video as well. So, that is all for today. So see you all on Friday.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.
Okay.